Hi everyone. Today I'm going to be talking about some tips for writing a resume. So I'm sitting in a very busy airport cafe while I'm waiting for my, once again, delayed flight, so I hope you can hear. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is the content. It's really important that your resume has a sense of purpose. So imagine that you're not you, and someone looking at your resume should get a clear sense by scanning your resume who you are and as far as your career, so your career goals. So your resume should cohesively convey your career goals. Sometimes if I have space, at the top of my resume, underneath my contact information, I'll include a one-line statement saying, purpose, to gain experience in the journalism field, or something like that. The second thing is that you always want to have proof. Just like in any kind of writing, you can't just have details about yourself like, oh, I'm dedicated, I'm goal-oriented or creative, without proving it. So instead of saying, dedicated, hard worker, please use, I think it's much better to use your actual experience to prove how are you dedicated, how are you creative, how are you goal-oriented, these types of things. Titles. So again, employers, or even if you're looking for an internship or volunteer experience, they see a ton of resumes. For the last internship I applied to, the position received over 80 resumes. So when someone is looking at 80 resumes aren't exactly the most exciting kind of reading in the world. So you want to make sure what you're offering, the information you're offering, is as detailed as possible. So for example, employers, so you want to make sure your titles aren't secretary or teacher or whatever it is. Try to be as specific as you can as far as your title of what position you worked at. Bullet points. So again, with writing resumes, always use bullet points because your resume, the person looking at your resume may spend just 30 seconds on it. So you want to make sure that it's clear and easy to read. Each bullet point should begin with an action. So for example, on my resume, I've written mentored freshman students from underrepresented socioeconomic and ethnic backgrounds, or provided academic and social support, attended study halls and social activities. Be as clear as you can about what type, instead of saying I worked, or just saying worked at, desk, or sorted papers. Try to make sure your verbs, and this is actually true for all writing, but make sure your verbs are as specific as they possibly can. Exactly which task you were working on. Keep it current. So this is probably going to be more relevant as you get older, but for me at this point, now that I'm entering my 4th year in college, I've deleted my high school GPA. I've deleted which high school I went to. Those things don't matter anymore. So although there's no absolute rule for this, I would suggest remove any sort of experiences that are more than 4 years old. So once you get into, at the end of your college career, your high school career, you don't need to include your clubs at middle school. And the same thing happens when you move on to the next stage of life. You can delete what came before. The next thing is keep it relevant and important. So make sure that your most relevant work experience comes first. And so hobbies, activities, and other information should come after that. So in my resume, although there are more than one way to do this, I place educate after my contact information. I place education, work experience, volunteer experience, extracurricular activities, and then skills and interests. Next, you want to tailor your resume. So this might be kind of annoying, but for each each position that you apply for, make sure you have a separate resume. You should go through and look at your resume and edit. So I'm going to show you my resume folder, just so you get an idea of how I organize things. So I actually have a folder called just resumes. And actually I made it even more specific, resume summer 2012, because this summer I applied to over 15 different organizations, and I wanted to make sure the last thing you want to do is send someone a resume that was meant for somebody else that you sent on accident. So here, to make it really clear, you want to be very careful. You definitely, for example, if I was applying to the LA Opera, they're not going to be very happy if the file that I send them is named, Circle X, which is a competing theater. So you want to make sure that whatever you name the file isn't like, FX345 or something like that. You want to make sure the file is named very clearly. So I always use my last name, underscore either the cover letter or the resume, underscore the name of the organization. So you can see here I have a really long list of all the different organizations that I've applied to. Yeah, and so same thing for, so it's very, very clear, very clean. Same thing for when you receive recommendation letters here. Recommendation letters are very, very precious, and when you get them, you want to make sure you save them for the next, if you're able to save them so that for the next time you come around, you may be able to use it again. So here, one of my professors, Professor Spurgeon, wrote me a recommendation for the organization CPG. So I've saved that here. So yeah, so now you get a peek into how I organize things. So back to my point, you shouldn't send out some generic, template resume. Know that your employer, even if it's just a volunteer experience, has seen many, many resumes. So make sure you only include information that is applicable and that you update it regularly. I update my resume every 3 months or so to include new volunteer experiences. I really, really suggest this because it's really annoying to not have updated your resume in 2 years, and 2 years later you have to apply to something and all of a sudden you can't remember, when you worked, or you can't remember the name of your boss, or you can't remember what exactly you did. So if you update it regularly, this will save you a ton of time in the end, promise. Okay, so some obvious things now. Include your name. This is surprisingly maybe not as obvious as some people may think. And for musicians or actors, you should the instrument you play should be also next to your name. But for everybody else, you don't want to make it difficult for an employer to find you. It should be at the very top. Imagine an employer looking through a stack of papers. They're flipping through the top of the page. They should be able to find your name and contact information. If you make it extra work, they could just decide, forget it. I don't want to deal with the extra 10 minutes it is to look up your email or something like that. Another thing about content, you want to try to focus on your achievements and to use numbers if possible. So don't just say, well, I did this, I did this, I did this. Try to say what you achieved, what did you accomplish. So, for example, I increased sales by 20%. I improved the grades from B to A for 4 students. The more you can quantify, meaning using numbers, your achievements, it's going to be a lot easier for employers to see what exactly you accomplished. Make it easy. That's basically the general rule. Make it easy for them. The next thing is work with what you have, but don't lie. So I know some of you are younger, and you may not have had 5 work experiences or 10 volunteered. First of all, don't lie. I think that always comes back to haunt you in the end. But if you don't have a lot of work experience, think about what you have had. Maybe you're a church volunteer. Maybe you are part of a certain club. Maybe you have a hobby that has really taught you a lot about responsibility. Maybe you've babysat. So if you're in high school, list your graduation date. If you're in college, also list that and what you're studying. So I think if this is your first job or your first volunteer experience and you haven't had a whole lot of experience, try to go back in your past and think about things that you've done, even if it is a hobby. And eventually, when you have more work experience, you can delete the hobbies. Another thing, no pronouns. So we know it's your resume. We know you're talking about yourself. You don't need I, me. You don't need to say I did this, I did that. Just start with the verb. Okay, so content's really important, but with a resume, design is also extremely important. I'll be showing you my resume as a sample design, although if you just Google search resume sample, there's millions out there. First thing, your font. Make sure it's professional, it's easy to read. I like Cambria or Garamond. I think those are both easy to read. Stick to size 12 font. You don't need to go any smaller or bigger. Unless you're in acting or modeling or a musician, stuff like that, you don't need a picture. It's just easier, and I think in American culture at least, it's strange to send a picture with your resume, unless of course your employer asks for it. Organization. Make sure it's easy to read, it's clean. Make sure that there's enough white space between everything so that we can read all the words clearly. Again, don't make your organization have to work really hard to learn more about you. Length. Ideally, your resume should be 1 page. I've never gone over a page, no matter what. I've used the 1-page limit as a way to force myself to limit and take out information that's not necessary. So if you absolutely have to, 2 pages I think is okay. But if at all possible, one page, be concise. Next thing, file format. At this point, almost all, many organizations accept resumes through email or an online application. So make sure that if you're using, if you're not using, I think Microsoft Word is pretty accepted, but make sure you're not saving it as something strange like a file format. If you have like something like Microsoft Works, make sure you convert it to a file format that is easily readable. Send a test email. I've done this before, and sometimes if you have some sort of formatting issue, and you send it to your employer and all the text is jumbled or crammed or enters are in the wrong places, then they may not want to read it, and they may not tell you that your resume was unreadable. They may just delete it and move on to somebody else. So send a test email to make sure that the text is readable. To be extra safe, you can also create a PDF version of the file. I think that's also really helpful. Consistency. So I'll show you mine in a second. But make sure that your format is consistent. If you always have dates on the right side, then make sure that you keep the dates there. If your year is always, in a certain format, is included in one bullet point, then you want to include it in all. So basically, when I look at a resume from far away, I want to see that it's one document. I don't want to, you don't need to do special fonts, colors, stars, hearts, nothing like that. Make it easy. It's not an art project. Just make it clean. So let me show you mine, actually. So this is my resume. I put my name in white on a black background because I want it to stand out, make it easy to read. Next to my name, I have my address. Because I'm in university, not in California, I place both addresses there so that people can find me easily. Sometimes when I'm applying for a job abroad or I'm unable to make it to an interview, I also include my Skype username so that people can chat with me online if they need to. So the next section is education. I've made this really clean. Sorry, there's hope you can hear, there's a airplane announcement in the background. But I place my year, so my resume, year always goes on the left side, although I've seen it on the right. I started college in 2009 to present. Notice that all the dates to present is always in the exact same format, same number of spaces. I've seen so many resumes where this is not the case, and it's really annoying. It does look very strange, I think, when it's not organized in the same way. Everything lines up. You see all the text is the same way. The sizes, all the text is the same font. So I place my university in the parentheses. It's my degree, a Bachelor of Arts and a Bachelor of Music, my GPA, and my study abroad experience. So that's it. I've took out my high school stuff at this point. This is not all my work experience. I've worked at other places in addition to this, so I said selected work experience. And I've placed for this, I was applying to a teaching job, so all my teaching information is first. Otherwise, you want to make sure that the work experience should be in order of date. So the oldest should be in the back, and the newest should be in the front. So you can see here, I've tried to be as specific as I can with my position. So here I was the Office of Development and Alumni Relations intern. In parentheses, I've placed, if it wasn't online, it was an in-person job, I've placed all the, sorry, yet another another airport announcement. But I've placed the location in parentheses, so always city or specific place, comma, and the state.
This is the final call for Lufthansa Star Alliance flight LH2.
Okay, so the next section is my volunteer experience. I volunteered at other places, but since this job was a teaching job, I wanted to just place my teaching volunteer experience. So you see that there. Again, notice that all of my first lines are always verbs. Okay, taught, communicated, assisted, designed, created. Extracurricular activities. This was for teaching at a theater company, so I included some of my theater positions. Otherwise, normally I wouldn't include the fact that I was a dancer or a cast member in these plays. Skills and interests. Here, I didn't put that I love skiing and snowboarding. I think here I placed the languages that I speak, German and Chinese, and some of my skills that I have, Photoshop, SketchUp, anything you know. So this is my resume. I hope that helped. And so it can be kind of a pain to apply for jobs, and internships and volunteer things. But I think if you're organized and you have a resume on file, then once you apply, it's really not so hard. Yeah. All right. Good luck.